We have a question from Anonymous571. You said, in the past, I used a single Gmail address, which was not your main email address, for all sorts of random account signups for things like Discord, Amazon, Netflix, news websites, one off trials, etc. You said, I've used this email address for many, many years. Needless to say, it's a bit of a cluster. Younger me thought that I was being smart, not having these accounts fill up my main email address with spam. Cut forward to today and being more privacy and security aware. You got a Proton subscription with a custom domain. You've been updating all your old accounts to either Proton or simple login aliases and aliases on your custom domain. Got me thinking, however, is this merely updating my email with a unique alias a waste of time? Should I rather be creating completely new accounts for all these websites? The thinking is that they likely keep version history of my email address, so I could still be linked or profiled based on previous email addresses. A data breach could also expose the email history, so it doesn't help in that respect either. Updating my email with a unique alias on all these websites is one thing, but creating new accounts and closing the old ones gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
Certainly, it's a good thing to switch to Proton, start using simple login aliases for all your accounts because it is super important to use a different email for every site that you use for the same reason, pretty much, that you'd use a different password for every site that you use, which is that you don't even necessarily have to be concerned about the website itself tracking you, although that is definitely a concern with some websites. But data breaches are super common. And when these data breaches are out, if your email is shared between data breaches, that does create a pattern that can be used to track you across these sites and create a profile of like the kind of sites that you're using. And these data breaches are super common. So you don't want to have any information between data breaches that can potentially be linked together. That is a privacy concern. As far as updating your email with accounts you already use or deleting accounts and starting over, that is something that is going to really depend on what you think is worth it. I think the person who has this question really laid out a lot of the reasons why you might want to do that, and also the reasons that you wouldn't want to do that, especially like just the effort involved in having to recreate all of these accounts. For a lot of websites that you would sign up with, it's probably fairly unlikely that they are tracking like email history, for example. And if we're talking about like a big tech company or a data company like Amazon or Facebook, I would think that that is more likely. But if you're talking about like a general e-commerce shop or a random form or whatever, it's probably unlikely that they're storing that historical data forever. And so changing that might be fine. But of course, that is a case where you would have to trust that is happening. And you'll never know for sure.
This isn't necessarily proof, but in all the years that my brain has become an encyclopedia for companies that have had data breaches, I've only ever seen one that had a breach that exposed the email you signed up with. I find it kind of hard to believe that if this was a common practice of companies keeping like a history of your email addresses, that we wouldn't have seen more of those breaches by now with how common these breaches are.
I would
So
just add on to that really quick that, like, in my experience hosting software, like thinking about open source software, we're talking about the major platforms like WordPress or forum software, all the stuff that like all these tiny sites would be using. I've also never seen really any situations where like that is commonplace in software.
and also that story that I referenced, it was literally only the sign up email. So if you signed up with Gmail and then you changed your email like 50 times, it would only have that Gmail and then your current email. My only concern with this, if you want to make all new accounts, I certainly don't think that's a bad idea. My concern would be, especially with some of the more mainstream platforms you mentioned, like Discord and Amazon, I notice it's becoming increasingly hard to make new accounts, especially privately. Like a lot of them will ding you for using VPNs. A lot of them will ding you if you're on like Linux or an uncommon browser. If it's something like Domino's and you're ordering pizza, right? They don't care. As long as the card goes through, make a new account, whatever. But if it's something like, again, like Reddit, Discord, they're probably going to put up some blocks and like make it probably more of a pain in the ass than it's worth, in my opinion. And especially some of them like Gmail, Discord, they might require a phone number and they're kind of strict about not allowing voice over IP. It really depends on your threat model and how much work you're willing to put in. But I don't think you have to. I think if you want to, it's not a bad idea. But in some cases, you might get diminishing returns.
I certainly don't think you have to do this all right away unless you have a particularly good reason to. We typically recommend unless you have an immediate concern right away of some threat against you, just taking your time with it. I think you definitely don't want to burn out like spending many hours straight just constantly recreating all of these accounts.
You mean you don't have to be me, the psychopath who changed all my passwords in one weekend in one sitting?
I don't think you have to be. I would say if that gets you going, then good for you.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, but I definitely did that. It was not wise.